Welcome to the Tailwind Marketing Podcast, where we talk to IT marketing leaders about how to drive more sales. Hosted by Carlos Corredor, founder of Condor, an Inc. 5000 company and one of the fastest growing IT marketing agencies in the US.
3, 2, 1, 0.
This episode is brought to you by Condor, a digital marketing agency for mid-market, B2B, and IT companies. Most B2B marketing teams struggle to drive sales, overwhelmed by long sales cycles and an elusive audience. Condor helps you measure and generate a qualified pipeline, make the most with your budget, and finally get executive recognition. You can learn more at condoragency.com. And today we have Ben Ryan with us. Ben is a marketing manager at Transact Campus. It's a technology and financial services provider for higher education institutions. They have over 500 employees and offer credential-driven payment methods and a mobile-centric experience in campus to their end users. And we'll talk a little bit about that today, amongst a few other insights. So welcome, Ben. Why don't you expand, please, on that introduction?
Hey, nice to be here with you today. I'm Ben Ryan. I'm the marketing manager for Campus ID and Commerce at Transact Campus. We have products in mobile ordering. We do credentialing on the wallets, NFC wallets, and that's primarily what I focus on. So we have our products, of course. This is sold to schools and higher ed. And then my main job here at Transact is to market to the students. So building the go-to-market, basically the go-to-market campaigns for those schools, and then just marketing directly to those students, faculty members, and parents at those universities and institutions.
And I love to have your background here in the podcast, because I think it brings a fresh perspective to the B2B world, in the sense that Transact Campus's clients, even though Transact Campus is a B2B, itself, their clients are colleges, campuses. So obviously, they cater to their students, right? So they are D2C. So in this case, Ben was explaining how he has to understand both worlds and wear two hats. And I think that's something that we often forget in the B2B world, that a lot of times our clients, they have end users themselves, right? And if you don't understand our client, then you probably are not going to, bring a lot of value to them. So why don't you, first of all, do you agree with that, Ben? And how, what do you see as the main differences, and how you think having experience in the D2C world has helped you be a better marketer in the technically B2B, but obviously, B2B2C world?
Yeah. B2C is a lot of fun. I mean, I kind of it just stumbled upon my lap about 8 years ago. So it's different every time, every campaign. It's not the same. So when you're thinking about B2B, you always know that you have your brand as a company, and then you're taking that brand and then you're building a campaign, whether that is selling mobile ordering, selling a credential product, or selling a payment solution. Sure, it might be different, but it still is in that Transact's brand, right? So when we are looking for B2C, you're kind of taking your product is still being used in that space, but you have to take out a lot of the, I call it the corporate fluff, because you're marketing to the students. So they need to you need to pretend as if you are the client's, basically you are the client. It's marketing to that end user. And it's the one piece I think a lot of companies miss, is the end user piece. You see a lot of companies, they have the B2B space and they have the product marketers, but a lot of them are missing that customer facing piece. A lot of times I feel like companies have this idea that, you build a product and then they'll come. A lot of times you need that extra marketing person to finish the buyer's journey, to help succeed. because if the end user isn't using your product, basically your client could say, it's not being used, we're going to go with another provider. So I think it's really important, and it really helps kind of amplify the B2B strategy, especially with like retention, renewals, you name it. But I think it's really important for any corporation and any vertical when it comes to technology.
And another interesting thing about your role is what we're saying about the generational differences. And I think B2B in general, but in particular IT providers, that skews to an older demographic, right? Let's say people in their 50s, maybe their 40s, Then you have management, which, and especially marketing management, that let's say, okay, it's a little bit, let's say, in their 30s, right? But then in this case, you have end users of, universities, so they are in their 20s, or even, from 17 to 20, So how has that dynamic worked for you? What have you seen there?
So that's the even more fun part. I feel like my demographic is changing every single time. So for B2C, like you have your faculty and staff members, right? So you have that. You have your older millennials, your boomers, your Gen X folks, and then you have the students, which are now encompassing, some millennials, mainly Gen Z now, and then we have Gen Alpha coming into play. So all these generations need to be marketed to differently. So it makes you have to put on your thinking cap a little bit and change the way that you're doing things. You have to get some memes out there. You have to use TikTok ads versus Facebook and Instagram. Maybe the creative needs to be a little more eye-catching for the new generations and things like that. These new generations, I think there's a lot of this try then buy. So like building these marketing strategies where they get to try this a little bit when it goes live, and then letting them get comfortable with the technology. I'm also I built documents to address to the newer generations, it's the same as X, Y, and Z that you've done before. It's just it looks different, and it's a little shinier and more polished, types of comms like that. But when it comes to faculty and staff, for example, those are the, anti-technology group, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's how do we address those concerns, and how do we market to those people? So a lot of times I have strategies for, I have different email campaigns for faculty and staff than I do for students. And then you got to think about how can I reach them, and how can I increase adoption and retention and usage with our products with those, and continuing to do that. So it's a lot of fun. Every year it changes, and it keeps me on my toes. But we kind of do some surveys to kind of get some feedback. So we have student surveys from some campuses help and partner with us nationwide. We're in North America, Canada, US, and then in Australia. And you'd be surprised, even when we start expanding outside the US, we start seeing differences in buyer habits, is what we're going to call it here. So we'll see students in maybe the province of Victoria. They're going to be different than students here in Georgia. And then we have students out in Sydney, right? They're going to be completely different than they are over here. So that's the other added layer that's a lot of fun, is adding in regions, and kind of, I don't know, it's a melting pot of fun and data. And then you take that data and you always have to pivot.
Yeah, I mean, Australia, Canada, and the US, and even the US, it's so big that you have even different subcultures within it, right? So I think the only thing that those three countries and areas have in common is essentially the language, because everything else,
Correct.
it's
I've even pioneered, we just partnered with this other company called Blend to help add languages. So we have FAQs and things like that too. So now we are adding new languages and translating things, so we can reach even more people and raise adoption that way. It's to that point too, in the US, it's completely polar, right? So we have the South, the Southeast, the West Coast has a whole different, I would say, vibe, right? So West Coast is about sustainability, recycling, the environment. And then the Southeast might be a little bit different message. as compared to the Northeast and the Midwest. So yes, the US is a lot of fun too, when it comes to splitting up by the region.
And for me, it's already challenging in a and our for example, we are a marketing agency, so and we obviously are B2B, and we go for decision makers in the marketing function and that's usually it's not as young as Gen Z. It's usually millennials and boomers that we go after, and even millennials and boomers, their attention span is really short, right? I always tell either my team or our clients, like, no, nobody's going to watch that 5-minute video, nobody's going to read all of that blog post, right? You need to really shorten your format, right? So for millennial boomers, it's already as an audience, it's already tough to do short form content. You always want to say more things. It's already challenging, right? But imagine for kids, it's like or teenagers, or is that what are you seeing? Like, is that the case? How big of a challenge is that? What have you seen that has worked in terms of let's say length, but in general, I would love to hear some insights on the differences in engagement and responses from the different generations.
Yeah, so like 3 years ago when I came to Transact, of course we have like our partnerships, outside all our third party partnerships and contracts and things like that we need to have. But we have these templates, right? And that was my first thought, was we need to change this up, because Gen Z, to your point, we're losing their attention span like after so many things. So there was a template in there that was 3 pages long, right? That was an email template we gave to schools to use. We cut that down to 1 page. I even made it probably half a page, because I don't think we need to explain all of that in one email, because they're not, like, to your point, they're not going to scroll all the way to the bottom of the email. So then I'm also then started hosting things on websites and breaking it by the wallet that they're using, for example. So if we're talking about NFC credentials, instead of hosting all of the information on one email, I then split it up based on that person's persona or buying experience. So if they're an Android user, what wallet are they using, Google or Samsung? And then I'm taking them to the correct place to learn how to provision, learn FAQs, things like that, so they can quickly get through the process. Because if it takes them longer to figure out your product, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to use your product. The other piece is like just shortening everything that we do. I had an FAQ document, for example. We work with Apple, Google, Samsung, and they all want to have their information on the FAQs. That FAQ page was 25 pages long, and it was required to be put on all the schools' pages. So what we did was cut that down to 5 pages and only left questions that kind of pertain to the campus. Kind of like, what happens when you graduate? What happens when you enroll? How do you get SSO? Those kind of questions. But then we took anything with a third party out, and we kind of made those landing pages, and we made student-facing landing pages where we can update the content in real time. And let's say like there was an update, maybe the OS changed, maybe there's a new device change. I'm able to make those changes really quickly and update all of those students nationwide and globally within minutes. So before, we would have to send emails to a campus and say, hey, by the way, you need to change your website. And that just wasn't efficient. So like changing some of those processes and scaling that, because we are only a team of 3. So if you can imagine, we have 3 pillars, all that fun stuff. But when it comes back to Gen Z, to your point, yes, we have to always pivot. We have to change and make things shorter, and change the way that we market to those generations. Because just because we used it before 5 years ago, 6 years ago, doesn't mean that it's going to work now. And to make sure that we are successful in every product launch that we do, we make sure that we have to pivot to that new generation.
Yeah, for example, I'm 39, so that technically makes me a millennial. I even think that I think more like a boomer in a lot of ways than a millennial. But even me, when I'm on a website, either buying something, requesting information, they make me click multiple times, or I click on something doesn't work, I'm like, this company sucks, you know? So it tells you just by the user experience how much you can conclude in a second about a company. So I'm sure that happens, you know, to you guys, especially with Gen Z as the end
Yeah.
user.
So like one tool I use as a secret for a B2C marketer, especially if you're in the student space, is Reddit. Students will not come to the company anymore. You won't see reviews on app stores. That takes too much time, you know, to do all that and complain about all that stuff. But like on Reddit, they just naturally are just talking to each other and saying, oh, I don't like this company. Or it's cool to see like if the students who did read come and tell the students like, well, if you read the FAQs, and that just makes me smile. Just seeing that organic conversation, and just like students helping students. And then you get to see the fun stuff, like where students like, this is great, it works everywhere. Or you get to see like the sad parts of the stuff that you need to see, but need to address is like, oh, it's not working because of X, Y, and Z. And then we take that feedback and then kind of help enhance the product. We also have like, obviously our admin can submit something for ideas portals, enhancements, etc. But I think Reddit is kind of our ideas portal for students. And I kind of go there and kind of gauge what's happening on campus nationwide. And then kind of, that's how I kind of change my comms every time. It's just honestly Reddit. Just seeing how they talk to each other. How should I have phrased it differently? Should I make the FAQs different? Should I, add some more video, pictures, things like that. Honestly, I would add more videos and things like that. But with some of our agreements and things like that, we just making sure like everyone, like our partners obviously want the, our Gen X and boomers, they want the whole FAQ listed out. And that's understandable. So I have to somehow work with that while kind of addressing this new generation. So yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, it goes to show the importance of being what a lot of people call a T-shaped marketer, which, versus a silo marketer. You have to understand the customer, you have to do some market research firsthand and also use the data available. You then have to generate content. You then have to sometimes do demand generation campaigns. And if you don't know how to do, or if you don't believe that you have the responsibility to understand each of those phases, you're just gonna be a silent marketer, and you're not gonna be a good marketer after all, right? It sounds like you understand and your company understands the importance of having somebody that wears all of those hats. Obviously that's really challenging, but it's necessary, right? So could you tell us a little bit about your experience in doing all of those things? Because we talked about your research and then generating the content based on those insights, but then also sometimes either collaborating or executing demand generation or lead generation campaigns.
Right. So like I primarily focus on the B2C side, but I also call myself a B2B2C marketer. So all the content I grab from these campuses, we have some big names out there, right? So when we launch some of these big names, especially in Australia, here in the US, we have some of the Big 10, right? We take those quotes, whether it's student quotes, for example, those are really hard to get, like the end user experience. So grabbing those quotes, grabbing those moments, those experiences, like maybe going to one of their launches and just grabbing video and like that organic stuff. And then bringing it back and making sure that our other marketing teams, so we have our corporate market here at Transact, we have a corporate marketing team, we have a demand gen team, and then we have a product marketing team, and then we have the end user marketing team, which is called the engagement team. So we take our content and then I make sure to share it with our other teams so they can do campaigns for increasing sales. So our demand gen team obviously would be focusing on increasing sales for our solutions. So I grab whatever content I have and give that to them. For our corporate marketing team, it could be press releases, right? We could talk about going into a new region, new market, getting some quotes from some stakeholders on campus, making sure that I project manage and get that stuff to them as well. I also coordinate social media. So I make sure like I love to highlight clients. These projects take time. It takes energy. So the work and effort they put into it, I want to make sure they're highlighted and like they get some love on social media. So every time that we have a product launch, I try to highlight them on social media and say, congrats on going live, right? And I tag their school, make sure that they know about it. And then I built like a HubSpot landing page to make sure that we can track those leads. So like, did we highlight a certain campus and did we get a lead or some interest because that school went live, right? So definitely B2C opens the door to getting more content and kind of like when you collaborate with all those other teams, they're relying on you to grab that content so they can make their content. Otherwise, it'd be the same B2B message, right? Just changing it up, getting some student stuff, getting some new videos, some new highlights. Definitely, it's a lot of balls are bouncing around, so it's a lot of fun to coordinate that as well. But always come back to making sure the client's happy, and then building that relationship and continuing to build that relationship. So then we can come back and do case studies, right? Or come back on campus or highlight them for something down the road. I always am a proponent on highlighting my clients. By the time I finish a project, I don't call them clients. I call them my friends because we went through it all. And then I always want to make sure that I'm highlighting for them awards. Like in the higher ed space, there's different organizations like NACUS and NACUS and all that stuff. So like making sure that they are highlighted there and they have the tools to kind of get awards and kind of highlight them for their accomplishments for using our products. It's just a full circle swing. So if we continue to make them happy and happy that they chose us, and then their students are happy, and then that kind of leads to more sales. So it definitely helps the B2B side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally agree. A lot of times it doesn't, it's not a natural reaction, to all, because you work in your company, right? So it's a mindset switch, to understand that you really have to function as if you work at your clients' companies. Otherwise, it will be really hard for you to do valuable marketing for them.
Yes, it's one time I went to Penn State. It's one of our clients, and I went there, and the marketing team, the director of marketing, Diane, she came to visit their campus because they were going live with our product, right? And I go into their office, and she said, "I got your desk ready," and she had my whole desk set up in her office for me to work there for a couple of days while I was visiting. So definitely, I will say I take off my Transact hat and put on whatever hat for the client that I'm working with, and I pretend as if I'm working at that client's office. And I have to think B2C every single time. I can't just think Transact would do it this way or this is what we need to do. It's different every single time. Especially if we have schools internationally, you got to think different. Like just because the US English language is, here in Australia, they might say things differently. So like thinking ahead, like changing the FAQs just slightly to match their English. Or if we have, Spanish speakers, making sure that we have the right dialect in certain areas. Like just thinking like those little things is kind of what makes it fun and special for B2C.
Ben, what else do you want to share that maybe I haven't asked and that you think our audience would benefit to hear from your experience or the topics that you're passionate about?
I am super passionate about B2C and B2B2C. I think it's really important for companies to have teams like me because we are the last part of the buyer's journey. And I think if you have a marketing team today and you don't have a B2C team, I highly suggest getting one because a lot of times building I'm more than just a marketing person. I'm kind of like client success, if you think about it, just making sure that the client is successful using our products and retaining that client and making them happy, and just kind of just being there for them, always being a resource for them, because a lot of times companies close a project and yeah, they're still a client, but like, and we do have CSM teams, but this is like an extra added on bonus, like an extra person to talk to, kind of I call it like a hype man situation. And over the last 3 years, I've launched almost 75 plus custom go-to-market campaigns, 75 and counting. There's gonna be more this year. I've also, designed and launched adoption playbooks and marketing tools that help accelerate their growth and increase our customer satisfaction. So even though we might have customer surveys that go out, I want to make sure that, am I doing well as a marketer? Did I knock all the boxes? Did I check all the boxes for them? Is there more that I could do? I'm always looking to grow, right? And they love that. They want to give you feedback, right? So you don't want to leave them like with the typical like general survey. Out of the last 3 years, I've talked to over 250 fabulous individuals from different institutions across North America and Australia. And I will continue to grow that, just grow that network, where people just come and ask me for help all the time, every year, come back and say, hey, can you help me with these new marketing strategies? Or do you have any tips and tricks to help reach this market? Or we're having issues trying to reach this cohort. Can you help us? And that's fun for me, just building that relationship and seeing them every year. Yeah. But other than that, I would say I love everything B2C. I think it's a great piece to have part of a company. I think it's very important to incorporate and kind of invest in that area, because I feel like if you lose the end user, then you kind of lose the sale. So it's kind of like you need to finish the buyer's journey. You can't just stop after the quote is sold, or it's sold, the product is sold, and then the sale is done. There's always more that you can do. And I think it's very, very important.
Yeah, well, great closing thoughts there, Ben. Appreciate you being on the podcast. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Tailwind Marketing Podcast. If you enjoyed it, remember to subscribe for future episodes. Until next time.